Sometimes a parent looks at an adult child who is taking their photo with a look that says, "Don't do me any harm." And that frightened, non-collaborative relationship to the offspring is what you see first. These words from the provocatively entitled Ending Ageism or How Not to Shoot Old People by Margaret M. Gillette offer up a stark warning and illustrate the potential difficulties that can arise when working on a project with an elderly parent, where the need for critical awareness and compassion can so easily become opposing forces. This dilemma becomes most prescient when the adult child photographs a parent who is living with dying. The drive not to be exploitative or coercive makes me constantly question my motives when making this work, and led to the decision to include my mother as co-researcher, as this situates us as joint contributors and investigators. This is a picture of my mother taken by me, her daughter and carer. The title of this photograph is Persona 1. Persona is one of several words in Latin for mask. My work addresses representations of the last phase of life, or what has been termed the fourth age. The fourth age functions as a subjective space or social imaginary, a repository housing the projection of our fears as to what deep old age will mean for us. The influence of old age's cultural and social past remains and impacts heavily on contemporary imaginings of later life. The sociologists Chris Gilliard and Paul Higgs reveal that the impact of the fourth age produces what they have termed the orphaned body. This is an abject entity who will be continuously frailed, the outcome of a multi-system deterioration that anticipates a seemingly irreversible pathway toward ever more adverse outcomes. And apparently this horror awaits all of us who fail to age successfully. In addition, this process is signified by an absence of self-consciousness and self-control. And they claim that it is women who are more likely to find themselves in this situation than men. Seen in these bleak terms, there can only be decline and the end of an autonomous existence. Through my research, I'm asking if there can be perhaps a more positive reading that sees this as a stage of life that can instead be represented by resolution and acceptance. My research utilizes a single case study, my mother. By examining what is both particular and complex within a bounded system, knowledge which then speaks beyond the case itself can show us how an individual life meaningfully organizes broad and fundamental human themes. And hopefully that we can learn from an embodied experience of old age. Centering on the caring dialogue between my mother and myself, and how we experience our place within the formal care system, we are together examining issues of power relations, which are often unwittingly embedded within it, and how these impact upon my mother's ability to remain autonomous. In addition, and perhaps unsurprisingly, these issues are sometimes mirrored within our own personal relationship. As daughter carer, and what often feels like mother to my own mother, I am rooted in this story. We are working in collaboration, but I'm aware that we're defined primarily in relation to each other as mother and daughter, where I find myself advocating, as Kathleen Galvin describes, as complex mediator between her public and private worlds. Our story is but one of many currently being played out across the world. It hides in the private sphere, but its repercussions ripple out and its effects are many. It is expected that most of us in Western societies will reach this last phase of life. What is almost certain is that many more of us will face the challenge of caring for an elderly relative, or will ourselves need to be cared for by others. These could be strangers or a family member, and most of us are ill prepared for this reality. To mitigate these tensions, we're exploring phototherapy techniques as a methodology based on those originated by Joe Spence and Rosie Martin, as seen in Putting Myself in the Picture from 1986. And more recently, the Representing Self, Representing Aging initiative, as a challenge to the search for the ideal self, and as a way to examine the limitations of what are deemed positive images of aging. We're deconstructing representations of good and bad and melancholic and carnivalesque. These are unhelpful binaries, which make up so many of the images of older people we see today. Using masks as a way to open a matrix of narratives is an opportunity for transformation. A mask affords the wearer a shape-shifting ability that can have a symbolic significance. Clark Moustakis, the originator of heuristic inquiry, stated that in every person, there are creative sources of energy and meaning that are often tacit, hidden, or denied. As Spencer Martin described, phototherapy encourages old symbols to be explored, enjoyed, reworked, and subverted towards finding and creating new symbols. Together, we employ methods which are performative and playful, and as such are less onerous upon my mother as a research participant and collaborator. And the idea is to have some fun along the way. Issues of power are hopefully diminished as we both perform the roles of photographer and photographed. In this photograph, my mother is wearing a cheap Halloween mask depicting a nightmarish rabbit. This was an impulse purchase picked up along with her weekly shopping on Halloween last year. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've been working with the idea of masks or face coverings as concealment and disguise, and now with a particular focus on its current use as protection for self and others. Masks and performance have meanings that can be instantly understood by an audience that is familiar with the specific codes embedded within that performance. Here, the codes are missing or disrupted in an attempt to conceal the wearer's true identity. The effect is incongruous and uncanny. The sinister smiling face on top of the neat buttoned-up body is unsettling. It's as though a spell has been cast. Rabbits are prey animals and are well adapted to the underworld, where their vulnerability is protected by darkness. By obscuring my mother's face, she becomes a more menacing embodiment of herself. The mask becomes a warning, and it gives her a new kind of apotropic power. The invisible older woman has become hypervisible.